everybody. Ooh. Hey, everybody. Happy Halloween. Thank you guys so much for being here with me tonight. Oh my gosh, I have a very fantastic Halloween special for you guys. I have the honor and the privilege to be part of the Dogman Encounters 5 Nights of Dogman series with Vic Cundiff, you guys. Thank you so much, Vic, for letting me be a part of that. And yeah, so I have some fantastic Dogman stories for you guys tonight from my very special guest. I have Mark Machek here. You guys might know him as Cryptiville. He's in the chat, or excuse me, not the chat. He's in the studio tonight, and I wanted to thank everybody who's in my chat tonight. All of my moderators, all of my friends in here. I know you guys could be out trick or treating, but y'all are here with me, the Cryptid Huntress. So a big shout out to all you guys. Thank y'all so much for being here, including you, Vic. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you guys would like to follow along with all of my shows and everything that I've been up to, you guys go to my website. That's thecryptidhuntress.com. Okay, you can find me there. If you'd like to support what I do, I have a Patreon. That's the Cryptid Huntress over there on Patreon. And also, I do have a shop. It's called War Woman Goods, and that's over on Etsy. Okay. Awesome. Well, I don't want to waste any time tonight. I would like to go ahead and introduce my guest because we have a lot to talk about this evening. Okay, my guest tonight is Mark Machek. Okay, and he lives around the LBL up in Kentucky. You guys are all probably very familiar. If you're familiar with the Dogman stories, you probably all heard about the land between the lakes. There seems to be a lot of Dogman activity that goes on up there. And Mark is here to tell some of his encounters tonight. After a series of odd paranormal events, Mark became interested in the paranormal, cryptids, and UFOs. Because of things that he's experienced, he embarked on a journey to understand all those things that he's encountered, all the cryptids, all the paranormal events, all the UFOs. And so please help me welcome to the Cryptid Huntress show tonight, my buddy, Mark Machek.
Hey, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
Well, hey, Mark. Thank you for being here tonight. Happy
You're welcome.
Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Welcome.
believe the veil is the thinnest tonight. So I figured, hey, let's talk Dogman tonight. How about that?
Sounds like
And
a
some of
plan.
your experiences. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mark, I have not actually talked to you ever publicly on a show. I've never even seen you. I think I saw you on Barton's show. He on his channel. You did an interview at the LBL with him not too long ago, and because
That's correct.
yeah, you haven't really talked a whole lot about your experiences recently, um, other than with Barton that time. So tell my audience a little bit about your background, and let's get into some of your experiences tonight.
Well, as you said, at a young age, I started having odd experiences and a lot of strange things that were going on, and I just, you know, wanted to try to understand the things that I was going through. Um, and it led me on a journey into investigating and looking into the subject of UFOs, and then just regular paranormal ghost type things. Because it seems like as we talk about these subjects, they're all interrelated at some point. So during the course of my looking into UFOs, I started having um, spectral or ghost type encounters, and that took me into that realm to try to understand that. And then um, later on, uh, I had a cryptid encounter or inhumanoid, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, encounter that led me into looking into that subject. My intent never was to, quote unquote, go looking for Dogman. It just kind of happened that way. Um, but I've been doing this kind of research for a very long time. Uh, I tend to work in the background because I'm not so much interested in trying to convince other people that these things are real. Um, More so, my uh, mode of operating has been to try to understand it for myself.
Yeah. Same here with me and my field research. I'm also a field researcher, and I was always in the background myself. I never in a million years saw myself doing podcasts and live shows. I didn't go public with my research for over 10 years at all. I didn't want to talk about it. And plus my team, we were all pretty secretive about what we did. Because back when I first started doing the research, it wasn't as popular as Bigfoot was not as popular as it is today. Okay, and these stories,
Correct.
and people didn't talk about it as much. Yeah, is that kind of where your head's been too? Because that's where I was for a long time.
Yeah, I just, uh, I never was real big into the whole. I'm not a storyteller, first off, and I mean, yeah, I can tell a story, but that's not my that's not my avenue of. It's not the road that I was traveling down. I was, trying to determine what the truths around these things could be. And that's why I chose the tagline for my website, that Cryptidville is where the truth lives, is because I'm not interested in all the fakery, all the chat GPT generated stories and all that stuff. I want to know the
Mhm.
truth. And you know interesting thing about the truth is you have a lot of people that claim that they want to know the truth, but in fact they don't. They want to know the truth that they can handle, or that fits into their paradigm of,
Right.
or their belief system. And anything outside of that, that's why we have so many people that get cast away into the realm of, you know oh well, they're not telling the truth, or they're making the story up, is because a lot of it is because that person can't accept what that is being related to them. And it's
Right.
very frustrating. When you're trying, when people ask you about your experiences, and then when you relate that to them, and then they might not instantly turn and say, oh well, you're full of crap or whatever, but at some point you make the determination that they don't believe what you're saying. It's very frustrating because you know you can't. The only thing that's going to make somebody believe something is for them to experience it themselves. And that's another thing
Exactly.
that I've been real big on promoting in the whole time that I've been involved in this is, don't listen to what I have to say. Go find out for yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that's going to make you understand or believe anything about the subject.
That's exactly what I used to tell people all the time when anyone would ask me, "Is Bigfoot real, Jessica?" I'd say, "Well, yeah," and I knew that those people that were asking me were just waiting to make fun of me. Okay, I knew it, and I'd say, "Well, I believe I've experienced Bigfoot. I've seen them, but you really need to get your own set of hiking boots, and you go out and go camping and go hiking and find out for yourself, because that really is the only way people are going to get the experience for yourself. I highly recommend that myself. So I think we're twinning. Okay, we both think along those same lines, but we're both also boots on the ground researchers and go out there, and we've been doing this for a long time. You've probably been doing it longer than I have. And so that
A wee
that
bit.
leads me to, just a little bit. But that leads me to the question of, okay, I hear, well, this is a statement first, but I hear a lot of stories that come out of the Land Between the Lakes area, and I know that's one of your stomping grounds up there. And I have looked into the family who was allegedly murdered or massacred up there by dogmen, and that's the story that a lot of people know about the Land Between the Lakes. Now, is there truth in that story, in your opinion? And does that kind of set the tone for people being a little bit mystified by the Land Between the Lakes?
Well, I think the story in general sets a tone for people being mystified about the area. And irregardless of what my opinion is, there is high strangeness that goes on in that area, in this area, whether you're in the LBL proper or whether you're on the outskirts. There is a lot of strange stuff that goes on. A lot of it is uh, made hush hush. We're put into the hush hush bin and never mentioned, and some of it is publicly shared with people. Now, as far as that event goes itself, there were only just a few people that uh, really actually spent time with Jan Thompson um, to try to garner whether or not there was factual information in her recounting of that event. And that was by myself and at separate times, myself and Barton Nunnally. We both spent time with Jan, trying to determine whether the story was factual or whether it was a fabrication. And um, I I spent a week with her. Um, every day I would go over and we would meet at and go look at different things. And you know you can really, the only way that you can determine the truthfulness behind some things is to actually spend more than just 30 minutes talking to somebody about it. You have to spend time with them and develop a a, a picture of their true character is probably
Mhm.
a good way to put it. And there were, my opinion is this, regarding that event. I'm not going to say that it's not true. I'm not going to say that it did happen. I'm kind of in that middle ground where there's enough about the story that points towards it being true, and then there's enough about the story that points towards it not being 100% true.
Mhm.
And some of those things that come into play are, for example, one thing, the day that Jan was supposedly going to take me to the location of where this event took place. Um, the first location that we went to, she was like, "Well, I don't know if this is the spot or not, and this looks right, but I'm not sure." And then we went to historically known location, and she was like, "This looks like the right spot." And um, because of the cemetery being there and other factors that came into the just the environment, um,
Mhm.
she believed that that was the correct spot. Now, if I was relating a story and I told you, hey, I can take you to this spot, I'm going to take you to the spot, and I'm going to be 100% sure that I'm taking you to the spot. I'm not going to be unsure about it. So that's one thing that points in the direction that it is possibly not 100% factual. But likewise, I've talked to so many people in this area, and I've had so many people come up and when I've asked about this event, they've said, "Oh yeah, that actually happened." But interestingly, once they found out, what I was about and what my interest was in the story, oh well, it never happened, or
Zip.
they
Right.
didn't want to talk about it. And that's another interesting factor that comes into play is, you you've got these people that say that they talk to these people and they tell them this. And I'm not saying that people don't give up information, but I've lived in this area for 25 years, and I mean I know how the people are. They're not just going to tell you everything you ask. They're not going to give you information like that. So, especially from somebody that's from outside the area, I'm
Right.
not really buying it.
Yeah.
So, the result of that was I just called it a draw. I mean, I've talked to enough people that say that it happened, and I've talked to enough people that say that it didn't. And the things that point towards it not being, legit, it's kind of there's not enough there to say one way or the other. So that's kind of where I was left with that. On the
Yeah.
flip side of all that,
Well,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
On the flip side of that, there is enough information that came out of my interactions with Jan that led me to believe that even if there were embellishments or you know uh, the story was aggrandized in some way, that there may be parts of it that are true, and that's a discussion for another day. Those things, because they're
Oh yeah.
totally unrelated to this event.
Okay. Well, okay. So, well, for my viewers who are watching tonight, if they're not familiar with the LBL family who was allegedly killed unalived for YouTube purposes at the LBL, that happened back in the early 1980s, and allegedly there was a family, a mother, a father, two kids. Some say that there was an extra child there too, but yeah, the stories have changed a little bit, back and forth, over the years, I'm sure, but allegedly, a dog man or, possibly 2 came and, killed them at a campsite, right, Mark?
That's what basically the story is in a nutshell.
In a
Um,
nutshell.
I've when I say that I'm not a podcaster or storyteller, but one thing that I am good at is um, I do love to research, and one thing that I have researched is I've gone back and looked at you know old newspapers, um, and news events from different sources and tried to determine whether there was anything during that time period that happened. And interestingly, one thing that I did come across is um, there was a there was a physical, um, what am I trying to relate it as, a library of sorts of physical newspapers that you could go look through that were from the early 60s up into present. And at some point, those physical newspapers were converted into digital format where you can access them online. And one thing that I noticed was in that conversion, there was a whole lot of information that was stripped out of those newspapers.
Oh, suspicious.
S- So why that happened, I don't know, but it did happen. So the
Okay.
things that you're seeing online aren't really the core or the full picture of what was reported in the news during those earlier years.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, you've done your research on that. And not only have you done your research, but you've had personal experiences out there. So, knowing what you know and seeing what you've seen, you do think it is possible that dogmen potentially did attack a family. What do you think about it? I mean, other than your research, do you think it was possible?
I definitely think it's possible.
Hmm.
Um, Now, granted, the two times that I've ran into these things, I wasn't attacked, accosted, or anything like that, and they were at a distance, not a great distance, but at enough distance where I wasn't like face to face with these things, and I can see where if you were to run up on one, and be within close proximity to it, within arm's reach or whatever, I could see the potential there, like with any wild animal or um, anything out there, for it to turn out to be a bad situation. Um, so yeah, I can see where it's possible.
Yeah. Well, it seems as though the majority of reports that I've heard and that I've taken from guests that I've had on my shows, um, and in the general public, we go out and take reports, and I've talked with sheriff's deputies here in the county where I live in Georgia, um, who have taken reports about people hitting werewolves that ran out in front of their car. They swear they're werewolves, or they never use the word dogman. They say werewolves. But it was never like the people were being attacked or even felt they just were scared because they couldn't understand what they were looking at. But they weren't being violent against the humans. And I think that that's the majority of the stories that I hear. I mean, these days on all the different YouTube channels, a lot of times you just hear about Dogman Attacks. It's like
Yeah.
the violent side of Dogman. I hear that all the time, and I think that gets a lot of views on a lot of shows. And I've been guilty of having shows where we talk about Dogman Attacks. Okay, because it's really interesting to look into. But how many Dogman Attacks could there possibly be? I don't know, because the majority of the stories I get are nonviolent.
Well, that's a very interesting concept, and I mean, the thing about it is, if something like that were to happen, the odds of it being hushed up or covered up are far greater than it
Yeah.
not being. Um, because I mean, just the nature of it. I mean, y- what would happen if somebody came out and put it in the news that, oh, there was a guy killed by a dog man or a werewolf in the LBL, and you know it was validated and what have you. That would instantly, people would be like, I'm not going over there.
Right. Well, it would cause a problem with the National Park Service and the state park services, because those are revenue sources for the government,
Correct.
and they don't want people not to go there and go camping, but it's really at our expense, because I part of what I like to talk about on my shows usually is, I like to warn people about the dangers of being in the woods, especially by yourself, with all the missing 411 cases and the clusters that David Politis talks about in his book series. Because we experience that, on a firsthand basis. Not that any of my friends have gone missing out of these parks, but we're out there studying, trying to figure out where these people are going, trying to get a grip on what kind of cryptids we're dealing with out there at some of these parks, and just across the forest, across the south. Um, so I think there's just a vested interest in keeping us in the dark about all this.
I would have to agree, and I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why that could be, and I mean, it's just which one is the correct reason. I mean,
Right.
naturally, if you're raising these things up in a lab, and you have to, you know, if it gets to where, once it gets, to, you know, adulthood or near adulthood, you're going to have to feed the thing, so
Mhm.
it, what a better thing to do than to turn it down into a national forest to where it can go out there and, hunt and survive on its own. I mean,
Yeah. It's a food source. I just remembered something, Mark. I have
what's that?
some of my teammates that had gone up to the LBL a while back,
Hmm.
and usually with a lot of these parks that we'll go into, they want you to make your presence known. You got to sign in. You need to put some money in the little thing if you're going to stay in the little box. If you're going to stay at the campsites out there. But I believe they were telling me that at the LBL, they did not want to know that they were there. Okay, they were like, no, you don't got to sign in. Don't worry, just go. And it was very suspicious to them. They were like, okay, well. They don't want to have any trace of us being there. Which actually added to the mystery of the place, I guess, and it also gave them cause for concern. They said when they got in there a little bit.
Well, it's definitely, I mean, if you look at most national parks, the I think the difference in it in the LBL and a national park is it's not a official national park. It's a recreation area, but it's still managed by
Okay,
the Forest Service and Department of Agriculture. So it stands to reason to me that it would fall under that same guideline where you would have, some reporting in there. And one thing that I personally have noticed is that there seems to be a trend where they're gearing more towards that when you go to one of the organized campgrounds or what have you, where they want you to sign in, where they
hmm,
actually log your license plate number, even if you're just visiting for the day or whatever. Um, you know, so I mean, you have to weigh it. I mean, some people would be okay with that. Some people wouldn't. Myself,
yeah,
I'm not in the business of broadcasting what I do or where I go,
right.
and
Me neither.
and and I don't particularly care for that. But from their standpoint, if they're required to maintain some kind of record of that, then knock yourself out. But the whole
Right.
thing with you know dispersed camping or unorganized camping, yeah, for the most part, they don't want to know anything about what you're doing. The only thing they
That's
want you to
right.
do is abide by the rules. As far as camping, I think I can't remember what it is. You got to be so many feet off of a road, so many feet away from a cemetery. You know, and that's another thing that you got to look at from the whole perspective of the LBL. There's 200 and what is it, 228 cemeteries in the place. So I mean,
Whoa.
yeah. So I
Wow.
mean, there's it's I mean, there are places to go camp without being near a cemetery, but
Yeah,
that's a lot of cemeteries.
it is. And dogmen are commonly seen around cemeteries. That's just,
True.
Indian burial mounds and cemeteries are common places to see dogmen.
That is true.
Hmm. Very interesting. I have a question for you. Okay, so you
Sure.
did mention a while ago, and we haven't even gotten into your stories yet. Okay, so I still got to
Okay.
hear those. I can't wait. But you had mentioned potentially these dogmen being grown in labs. Okay, what do you think a dogman is? The ones at the LBL particularly. Do you think that they could be some sort of a government super soldier program or a breeding program or government assets, or are they natural?
Well, my opinion on the thing is on Dogman in general is I think that we're actually dealing with three different types. I think there are those that occur naturally. I think that there are those who are, um, the result of some kind of uh, high strangeness linked to dark magic.
Mm,
Um, and then you have the ones that are chimeric in nature, which are basically lab grown under human control to some degree. And then, um, you know, I think that those three genres of this type creature, you know, uh, come into play a lot more than we realize. And for example, myself, my two encounters where I knew that that's what I was seeing. These two creatures were totally different.
hmm,
So when I had one that I saw that was straight up Van Helsing type dog man, and then the other one, human type body, hair covered human type body with a wolfish type head. You know, those are in my way of looking at it two different types. Now, as far as how many types there are, I don't know. I know that the wonderful people in the community have come up with the different variants and all this stuff through the years.
Oh, I have a picture.
So,
Do y'all want to see it? I think we've got these are some of the different types, hyena
mhm,
types, the Van Helsing types.
mhm.
I mean, there's actually I think in the top those might be Sasquatch up there. But yeah, there's different types and they're all very organized, but it's probably a lot bigger than that, I would
Oh
assume.
yeah,
But it's
but
easier to categorize things when you're trying to explain your story to people, I guess, and like your encounter.
with that, I I make that assumption, or I have that opinion based on the fact that I have seen those two different types, and I'll be the first to tell you, you know, the people that say, "Oh, I want to see a dog man," or "I want to see a Bigfoot," or whatever. Another thing that I've always promoted is be careful what you wish for because you just might get it.
Mhm.
Um, once you see one of these things, you can't unsee it, and you have no idea how you're going to respond to the situation. So to say that you're going to respond in a way is is a total unknown because of the simple fact that you don't really know how you're going to respond to it you know, until it happens. I mean, if you walk up on one of these things and you're like face to face to it or whatever, you don't know how you're going to respond to that. I wouldn't know how to
Mm-mm.
respond to that. Do you try to run? you know,
If you can,
so
probably.
so I always tell people to be careful about what they wish for with these things because you just don't you never know what you're going to get and you have no control over how it's going to happen. I've had two encounters as I've mentioned, and I'm fine with that. I could go the rest of my life and never see another one and be perfectly fine. Um, so I just if I had to tell somebody something about that, I would say just be careful because you really don't know how you're going to respond to an encounter.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh
you know, I-
yeah. Tell me about your first encounter, Mark. What was the first time? What was the first time you ever saw a dog man?
so it was. I was thinking about this the other day, and it was. I'm sorry about the dog barking. I have a little, a
Speaking of
little
dogs.
munchkin out there. I have a little munchkin out there, and she's mean.
Oh.
So um, I was thinking about this the other day, and it was pre deer season, the month of September of I want to say it was 2009 or 2010. It was one of those 2 years. Um, I had gone into an area where I was planning on hunting, and I went into the area. And to kind of give you a picture of it, there's kind of like a hill on this side, a gentle sloping hill that slopes up about, I would say, um, maybe 40-ish degrees on the right side. It's kind of bowl shaped and it comes around and it flattens out. There's some sparse trees, but in the middle of the field that I was walking in, there's a runoff. Well, up on the tip of the runoff, where the woods curved around, there is a spot up there where I was looking at hunting. So I knew that runoff would have, bare ground. So I went in there to look for deer tracks, and because I knew that um, what lived in that area, was looking to see if I could find any Bigfoot tracks. So I walked up. I didn't see any tracks that belonged to anything. So I walked to the edge of the woods, and I turned around and I came back, and I was just walking along a different route within the same area of bare ground, and you know trying to find tracks. And I got down to this certain point, and I stopped, and I was looking around, and I kind of glanced up on that sloping hill, and I was just standing there. And bear in mind, one thing I should have mentioned was that I had a camera with me, just a little digital camera, and because if I found anything, I was gonna more so for the cryptid tracks, I was gonna try to document it. So I'm standing there and I'm looking around, and I don't know how to explain this. I don't know how this works, but I knew that there was something a- around me because I could sense it. So I was looking around, and up on the sloping hill, there was a bush that was kind of by itself. And then there was like maybe 30, 40, 35, 40 yards between the trees. And it was, broom sage grass, growing up around it. So, and it was kind of knocked down in different areas. So when I looked up and I saw this bush, what I thought I was looking at, it was I thought it was a deer standing directly behind this bush. Because you know how if you look at the underside of the neck of a deer, they've got that white spot,
Mhm.
and it was looking straight at me, and I'm like, wow, that deer is just standing there looking at me over the top of that bush, and I was like, that's so weird. I was like, just standing there watching him, and I was waiting for him to move, and he never did. And then this thing, what I thought was a deer, turned its head to its right, and when it did, I could see the side of its head, I could see its ears, I could see its muzzle, and the only way I could describe it is it looked kind of cartoonish, kind of like Wile E. Coyote, but super huge.
Wow.
And on the side of its muzzle, it looked like to me it had taken like if somebody had taken its fingers, or it had taken its fingers and put it in something white, like some kind of white loamy soil or whatever, and just made like marks on the side of its face, snout.
War paint. Whoa.
Well, that's kind of what it looked like to me,
Wow.
but I was like looking at it, I was like, I have got to get a picture of this because if I tell anybody this, they're not going to believe it. So I was standing there and I was like trying not to move, and I had the camera in my hand. And as soon as I hit the power button to turn the camera on, this thing ducked down behind the bush, and I was like, "Oh crap, where did it go?" So I was standing there and I was kind of scanning back and forth looking for it, and I was like trying to find it because I knew it was going to pop up somewhere else. Well, I started looking, and I didn't see it anywhere. So it went down behind the bush. It was down behind the bush for about, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds. And then when I was just standing there trying to locate this thing, looking all over the place. And I focused back on the bush. And when I did, I could see it. It was down on this ground, on the ground, on its belly. And it was crawling away from that bush. And the strangest thing, as I mentioned in my previous interview with Barton Nunnally, the strangest thing about the whole experience was that as it was crawling away, I watched it cloak one of its legs. It's like it started at its ankle or at the base of its foot, and it slowly was going up its leg. How that works, I don't know. All I'm all I can relate to you is what I saw. And by the time it got out of my view, it had already got up to its knee and was like mid thigh. And I was like,
Wow.
thinking to myself, I was like, what in the heck did I just see? And then I was kind of lost focus of it because it went out of view. And then I got to looking around and I was like, it's starting to get dark. It's time to go. Because if it can cloak, you know, I'm not wanting to be out here in the dark with something that can cloak. And, that's basically that particular encounter. I never saw it again after that. It went out of my view, and I just totally lost it. And um, I was like, no, it's time to go. So,
Wow. Did that prevent you from going back to the LBL for a while, or did you go back and investigate the next day? I mean, what was your thought process after all that happened?
well, that particular location, just to clarify, that particular location and both of these encounters, so that everyone is clear, they did not happen inside of the LBO proper, but they took place just on the other side of the lake from the LBL on private property.
Okay. In Kentucky, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I would say straight line in that particular location, the lake is approximately, I would say the lake is probably in the neighborhood of around 4,000 feet wide. So I would say that I was probably a mile and a half from the LBL.
Close
Not
enough.
really,
Pretty
not really that
close.
far. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I was like, no, it's getting dark. I'm not wanting to be out here with something like that, whether it, was just crawling off on its belly to go do its thing or whatever. I'm not
Mhm.
interested in being out here with it. And I got out of there.
Yeah. I've personally had an encounter with what my team and myself we believe was a cloaked Sasquatch that ran up and hit me on the back of my legs from behind. And so it happens. It happens now. How they cloak, we're not sure, but I do believe that that does happen. It's almost like the Predator, the movie The Predator. And is it some sort of technology? I don't know. I mean, some say that the Bigfoots have chlorophyll in their hair, and they can kind of camouflage into the trees and the shrubbery and the surroundings, all the vegetation out there. So the same could be said for Dogman, apparently. Who's to say?
Well, the interesting thing is we don't know.
We don't know. That's right.
you know,
We don't
and,
know.
early in my days of research, I thought about it like this. You know, if these things are part of some kind of super soldier program or whatever, if what would you do? What would you put into it? You would put the best of everything that you could into it, right? So it makes sense to
Yes.
me that it would have, you know, abilities that are far beyond what we could probably even comprehend, and
Mhm.
then the factor of, one thing I never hear anybody mention about the whole chimera thing is, it is possible for attributes genetically to be amplified. So, you know, take for example sense of smell. If they take and they give this thing the sense of smell of a wolf, a wolf can smell you several miles away or it can smell
Mhm.
miles away. But if that particular attribute is amplified, it could probably smell what you had for breakfast 3 weeks ago.
Ew. Yeah, that's scary to think about. And night vision, cloaking. I mean, telepathy, right? Being able to mind speak and uh, enhance capabilities when it comes to things. And I was going to say enhance human capabilities, but do you think the dogmen have human attributes to them, or are they more dog-like?
Well, I think that because in my opinion, we're dealing with three different types here.
Mhm.
I think that there may be some human genetics involved there on at least two of the types. Now, the naturally occurring uh, dogmen, I think they could be just what they are, you know,
Mhm.
um, and what that is, I don't know. But if you were going to genetically engineer something, it makes sense to me that on some level that it would have human genetics involved because you would want that reasoning and solving ability that humans have. Some humans have. Let me rephrase that.
Some
Some
humans,
humans some humans have that ability,
not all of us. Right.
but you know, and then there's other things that come into play too that could be factors in why they would choose human genetics to use in a chimera like that.
Mhm.
Um, and those things are, um, if you were to ponder the um, the greatness of what humanity is, then um, you know, I mean, even if you were to look at it from a biblical standpoint, you know, according to the Word of God, humans are God's greatest creation. And that is because we were designed with free will and uh, we have the abilities that we have, even though the majority of us have forgotten those abilities. Um, it just stands to reason that you would want to include those things and maybe try to amplify them as well into a chimeric um, type entity. And, um, as far as getting into the whole Nephilim, thing, that's a discussion for another day. But
Right.
it definitely is something interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting encounter, and but that's not your only encounter. You had at least one more. Do you want to tell us about that one?
So this one's a little bit of a lengthy story. So during the time that I was living in that area, I was having repetitive Bigfoot type activity. Um, I had one on several occasions that decided that it wanted to smack the back of the building that I was living in the middle of the night and wake me up, and just different things, just all kinds of all kinds of different strange, interesting things. So I'm sorry, I got a little bit of a sniffle going on. So in the course of all that, um, I had contacted a good friend of mine, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you reach out to this guy? We just put this website up, and um, see if you'd be interested in, maybe adding your story to the website if you want to. I'm sure he would be interested in what's going on in your area." So I contacted him, and um, got to talking to him, and I didn't know at the time, but this particular individual was involved with a research group that shall remain unnamed, but has obviously some connections to some other external organizations outside of itself. So, long story short, I contacted him. I related to him what was going on, and um, he acted very disinterested in what I was relating to him, which is fine. Um, so I hung up with him and went on about my evening. 3 hours later, I was sitting there watching TV, and I hear a vehicle turn in on the road that I lived on. And that time of the night, it was 10:30. There's not a lot of traffic. And if there is traffic, usually you can tell who it is, right? So I
Yeah.
was sitting there and I pulled the curtain back when I heard the vehicle turn in because it sounded like a very different kind of vehicle. I could tell this was a diesel powered vehicle, and I didn't know
Bigger
anybody.
engine.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody that drove that kind of vehicle, so it naturally caught my attention. And I pulled the curtain back and I looked real quick, and I was like, "What in the world?" And this vehicle was kind of like a big, huge white. I call it an MRAP. It's one of those big armored vehicles that you see
Ooh.
law enforcement using for SWAT teams and stuff like that.
Oh
This
my.
thing, yeah, this thing was
That's
white in color, and
whoa.
it drove down past where I was living at. And after it got out of sight, I pulled the curtain back again and I looked. And the interesting thing, it never, because the road actually went into a loop and it never went on the bottom end of the road. So I know that it didn't make the loop, right? And it never turned around and came back out. So I didn't really pay too much attention to it at that point. I just thought, that's weird. So I just kind of went on about my business. And the next night, um, I got to talking to the landlord, and they were relating to me that there were people outside at night in the field the night before when I saw the vehicle, and they were there were like a bunch of people out there with flashlights, looking
Uh-oh.
around and hollering, and they even heard a couple gunshots, and
Oh.
just real strangeness.
And had you
So
given that gentleman your or that person with the Bigfoot resource the Bigfoot organization or whoever you reported that to, did you give that person your address where the
no,
sighting had been or the thing?
no,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
he had he had no idea where I was at.
Oh, okay.
So that's another interesting aspect to the whole thing is
I had to
no
ask.
nobody, yeah, and that's a good question. Nobody really knew that I was even living there. So
Okay.
that went on for about 2 or 3 nights. People out in the fields at night, flashlights, hearing gunshots and hollering, and I was like, what are these people doing? And I was like, it's kind of weird. So I didn't really think anything of it, but that Friday came around, and I, I when I got off from work that evening, I went out. The sun had already gone down. The stars were like real bright in the sky, and I was just standing there looking up at them. So I walked out into the road, and I walked up to kind of a hilltop that was kind of like more in front of the landlord's house than it was where I was living at. So I was standing there on top of the hill, and I was just looking at the sky, looking at the stars, looking around, and I looked. I happened to glance down, and when I did, there was something. I thought initially that it was a deer, it came from the field on the right hand side of the road and ran into the field on the left hand side of the road extremely fast. And I was like, wow, that was fast. And I was like standing there waiting to see what was chasing it, because as fast as it was going, at nighttime, generally a deer that's running like that is gonna have something chasing it. So I was thinking maybe a coyote's chasing it or whatever. So I stood there for a minute and was looking, waiting to see something come out, and nothing ever came out. So I just kind of, oh well, he was just passing through. So I went back to looking at the stars and what have you, and I glanced down again, and when I did, this thing was standing at the side of the road, and it was looking at me, and I was like looking at it. It was looking at me, and I was like, and at this time, the landlord's dogs had come out with me, and they were kind of standing there. They didn't see this thing or sense it. They were just standing there with me. This thing was standing at the at the side of the road. So my impression was that it had come back after it crossed the road. Now I was thinking about this, and it's entirely possible that whatever ran through the first time, this thing was what was chasing it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that to be 100% fact, but and the reason why I say that is because I never saw it come from the right hand side field and cross the road, so I didn't see it in tow behind this thing. I only saw it when it was at the left hand side of the road. So it was standing there, and the dogs had come up behind me, and I heard them, and I was like, just making sure that it was them. And when I turned back, it was standing dead in the middle of the road looking at me. This thing was huge. If I've seen polar bears in zoos. This thing had to have been as big as a polar bear. And
Whoa.
it was down on all fours, and it was kind of like straight up, you know, ears off the back of its head, and like it was just, and its head was facing towards me, and I could see its ears. And I had a flashlight with me, and I was standing there looking at it. I was like, I want to get a good look at this thing. So I turned the flashlight on, and I don't. When I say what I'm fixing to say, people are not going to believe it. That's fine. I'm not asking anybody to believe anything I'm telling them. I'm just relating what happened to me. When I hit this thing with the light, I had a 4 cell D mag light, and I hit it with a mag light. And when I did, there was nothing there. But as soon as I hit it with the light, the dogs that were standing there, next to me, kind of doing their own thing, all of a sudden they became interested in that area down the road, which this thing was about, I would say from where I was standing, it was maybe 50 yards. The dogs took off running down there. They kind of weren't really barking, but they were kind of, huffing and doing their thing. They ran down to exactly where the thing was standing and were sniffing around. So I know there was something there. And then they turned around and they came back. So I was like, I wasn't seeing things. There was actually something there in order for the dogs to, become interested in that spot. Well, I went back after that. I went back to my apartment that I was living in. And as I was heading up to the front door, I happened to glance up, and I could see an opening in the trees into the sky above the apartment. And there was a military aircraft. I would say it was either a C-130 or C5. It was big enough that I and low enough that I could see it, but it was gliding, and it glided across that opening. No sound, no nothing. Now, most of the time, if an aircraft, and, and and a lot of people don't know this, but if an aircraft is doing that over a location, generally there's a reason for it. They're not going to glide like that over a location just to be gliding over it. Usually, if they're in a position where they have to glide in, now they may do it to glide in and land, but over a location that's not anywhere near a landing strip, they're doing that for a reason. So I can't say beyond a shadow of a doubt or 100% that there was a connection there with this creature and this military aircraft, but it's kind of coincidental to me that they were in the both in the same vicinity of each other, and you have these people, and they're out there looking around and they're shooting guns. And what I think the scenario was is, and I often wondered this because of the level of activity that I was having in that area on the property that was where this thing was headed. There was an old abandoned barn that nobody used, and it was grown up. There was lots of bushes and trees and stuff growing up around it, and you couldn't, unless you knew it was there, where you could see the one spot on the backside of it where you could see the siding. Wouldn't even know there was a barn there. That's how grown up and covered up it was. So
Wow.
I'm thinking that at some point that may have been a hangout spot for the Bigfoot creatures that were living in that particular area. And it's entirely possible that this thing was chasing after one of them, and it was heading to that barn for perceived safety. Now, I didn't hear anything uh, after that night, but I'm trying to remember. There was one night after that, and it was after the activity stopped. There was one night I was in my apartment, and I kept hearing the sound. And the only thing I can, only thing I can relate it to is kind of like a. You've heard pterodactyls on the movies, right?
Yes, of course.
That's kind of what it sounded like to me. And it just kept going and going and going. It was making that.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what in the world is that? So I went outside and I was looking around, and it stopped. And I was like, well, it's kind of a pointless venture to be out here. So I went back in, and I never heard it again. But it just is weird that there was so much activity going on in that one location. And I don't think that, I think a couple of things that I do think or believe is my contact with that individual was directly related to those people being in that area. One, two, I think they were there to either capture, kill, exterminate, or do whatever they were going to do to the creatures that were living in that area. Sorry, I almost said the K word.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, okay, so I had to ask you that question earlier about you potentially giving your address to that person who took your report, because of course, with me being in the Bigfoot field research arena myself, and being in the mix and in the know with a lot of this stuff, um, there's certain people who refuse to give reports to people in certain Bigfoot organizations because they're afraid that then they're going to tell government officials or somebody about it, because sometimes when people have given reports, the black helicopters have shown up over their property, you know and things. So they're wondering, like, who is somebody's channeling their information to higher ups. And I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I've heard stories of that happening before, which leads me to believe that these dogmen, these Bigfoot, are potentially government assets. Either they were created or controlled, or both, potentially by our military or government or some sort of agency out there. And they're either, and I've heard reports of them being chipped and collared and all that kind of stuff too, Mark. So um, it's like they're being tracked.
I've heard the
So
same things. I've heard the same things, but you know the in, you the interesting thing is you can hear a lot of things out there, but him, I mean, it's like
Yeah.
how many people are actually coming forth with real, tangible, viable evidence that that's the case? I mean,
True.
I mean, you hear. I heard a very fantastic story about a guy who videotaped two Bigfoot having a death match in the swamp. I forget
Oh
who it
yeah.
was to put that story out. Incredible story, if true. Now the guy that supposedly reported it was a wildlife photographer, videographer, and he videotaped the whole death match supposedly. And but the caveat to it was that at the end of the thing, when the one Bigfoot realized that he was there, he lost his camera in the water, supposedly destroying the film and this, that, and the other. I mean, if something like that were to happen, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not true, but you know, that's one reason why me personally I don't come out with a lot of stuff is because you know it's to me it's fruitless to talk about some things if you don't have something to back it up.
Yeah. That's true. And I like to tell people about with my research that I do. I don't always talk about all my research, and actually, two of my teams we are under NDAs and stuff because we're still researching these areas that we go to, and so you don't hear a ton of stories out of me about my own experiences. But I do have several. I have a lot of stories I do tell. But with the field, with the Dogman stories, with the Bigfoot encounters, everything being more public now and it getting a lot of attention, it would be a little tempting for people to make up stories, to get that fame and fortune too. So you have to be very discerning when you're taking reports from people, when you are, hearing these stories. I usually go with my gut, and like you said, it is important to meet with people and get to know these people before you could jump to a conclusion as to whether their story is real or not, and to visit that location. I mean, we do on-site scouting. We do on-site. I've visited state parks where I've had a state park ranger here in Georgia call me, and I immediately did a FaceTime interview with him over the phone, over actually off Facebook, I believe. This was a couple years ago because I wanted to see him face to face to determine, first of all, if I should even go scout that place out with my team. Because it's important to know if somebody's trying to hoax you, or if they're just straight up making the story up, and then once you actually go out there and get the reports firsthand from people, and you go and you do investigate that location, then you do contact the coroner's office if somebody passed away. You do your footwork, on all this. It's important, and that's what field researchers do. And I guess that's what sets the field researchers apart from just podcasters and stuff. And there's nothing. I love podcasts. I'm a podcaster. Okay. But
Oh,
there is
there's
a
nothing wrong with it.
there's a little difference there with telling stories and doing some the field research.
Oh yeah, and there's like I was discussing with you earlier. There's nothing wrong with podcasters, storytellers. In historically, um, their role in societies has been very important. I mean, that's just the nature of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
historically. Um, so you know, please don't take anything I'm saying as being a jab against a podcaster or a
Or me
storyteller
neither.
because
I am a podcaster. Dang it. I'm both. I'm the best of both worlds here. Okay. And that's why, and you love getting out in nature, and you love going out and exploring and uncovering and unraveling the mysteries of the world. And will we ever unravel it all? Absolutely not. But we're having fun doing it. I know I am. I don't know about you. I am.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Those are amazing encounters. Oh my gosh. I mean, uh, I've heard stories before about Sasquatch and Dogman looking like they have war paint on their faces. I mean, just cryptids in general. I wonder what that's about. Like, what is it? Do you think that I did ask you if you thought that they were government lab made or natural, and there are distinctions, of course, but I would imagine that they do team up like a tribe or a pack, if they're dogmen, because there's safety in numbers, I would assume, and maybe they do have a little tribe, and they
Well,
feel like they could be at war. I mean,
could
that's
be.
just a thought.
Well, my opinion on the whole face paint thing that I encountered was, I think it was more of a camouflage in a sense than anything, because initially when I spotted it, I thought it was a deer. And what better camouflage could you ask for?
Yeah,
If you're if you're some kind
exactly.
of inhumanoid predator, whatever, and you're out there trying to either sneak up on deer or sneak up on people, you're not going to draw very much attention to yourself if you're camouflaged as a deer or perceived as a deer.
Exactly. Wow. And cloaking. Okay, those the cloaking ability, that's really interesting. That's the best camouflage. That's the best camouflage, actually.
Well,
Would be to be
you
able to
know, I,
cloak.
oh yeah. Well, you know, for many years, I researched by myself in the LBL. I know a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, well, that's crazy. Why would you do such a thing? It's dangerous. You're going to die. The dog
It is
man's going to
dangerous.
eat you." Well, you know, early on, I didn't really, I didn't really know the things that I know now, and I hadn't experienced what I've experienced. But, um, if you revert back to the interview that I did with Barton Nunley on his channel, which is Inhumanoids with Barton Nunley, um, I talk about a encounter that I had, or an experience that I had one day while I was driving down the road, and I had something fully cloaked jump across the road way into the tree line, and I'm talking about like a 90-foot leap. So to break that down, you know, I don't want to be out there by myself and get attacked by something like that. I mean, it would be on you and you wouldn't even know it.
Mhm.
You're out there walking down a trail and it takes a 90-foot leap onto you. I mean, and I'm not saying what it was or wasn't or whatever. All I'm saying is what it looked like to me. And it just the craziest thing. So that's one reason why I've gotten out of the habit of researching by myself, and I try not to be over there at night. Um, I have, gone over there at night, but it just, to me, the danger factor or risk factor involved in it is like multiplied. When you're dealing with things that, how they do it, I don't know, but if they're cloaked or semi-invisible to the point that you can't see them, you're definitely not going to see them at night. You may be able to pick them up on a thermal or night vision, but you know, most people don't talk about the realities of thermal and night vision. But the reality of it is your perception is off the second that you put one of those devices on your head. You know,
Mhm.
um, and it all goes back to the magnification level. Even at 1 by magnification on just a standard night vision goggle or night vision device, your depth perception is gone from the get go, and you know everything is magnified. So even though you can see, you're still going to run into stuff because you
Yeah.
can't perceive it as you normally would. So,
And you're blind when you take your eye off of it for the most part. So I like to do maybe a monocle, like
mhm,
just one eye, looking through the night vision or the
mhm.
thermal, the FLIR, because you need to have one eye that's going to be more adjusted in case you got to get out of there or something happens,
Oh yeah,
for safety purposes. Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Well, how many people go missing each year out of the LBL? Do you have a number? And is it high, or do you think we'd even know?
Well, that's a that's a very interesting question. And the reason why I say use the word interesting is because of the fact that you have some individuals that want to say it's X number or Y number or whatever, or that historically there's been, you know, just pulling a number out of the sky, 50 or 60 people that have disappeared or been killed over there. The reality of it is, I mean, you know, I'm going to revert back to the grandiose claims require grandiose evidence. So, the people that are making these claims, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I get it, because there is an event that took place over there that I'm aware of where a young man was killed, and or I did it. I said the word. I'm trying not to use that word.
Unalived. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
So he came to a very unfortunate end, and
So sad.
the originally reported incident was not anything like what really happened. Um,
Mm.
and that was covered up really quick,
Whoa.
really quick, like same day quick, within hours of it happening quick. So, um,
Wow.
yeah, there are events like that take place, and the thing about it is we don't know. I mean, do people have hunting accidents, boating accidents, swimming accidents? Do people drown when they're swimming? Yes, but the when those type of events are being reported, is there another factor involved in it? We won't know. Um, so it's really hard to say what the actual number is. Um, so that's going to be, without actually putting a number on it, that's going to be my answer, because
Okay.
of the
That's
simple fact
you
that it's so hard to put a number on it.
It is. Okay. Well, I didn't expect you to have an exact number. Okay. But I just thought, um, my brain's working overtime right now because as you're saying that, uh, what took me out to that state park eventually, where that state park ranger had contacted me and begged me to bring my team out there because they had gotten 9 Sasquatch sightings and reports over 1 month. Okay, in his park, and we ended up going out there, but it took a lot for me to go out there because he finally told me. He said, "Well, we've had a Sasquatch related death at the park," is what he told me, and so that got my attention finally. Okay, and I geared up and took 3 of my teammates out there, and we spent the weekend out there. And he took us on a tour. We investigated, and one of my teammates actually um, knows the coroner out there, and we looked into this death. And now I'm thinking, well, the coroner said no, they didn't die in the way that you were told. But now I question, was there a cover up? Okay. And I'm not going to get into details of that. That's for another time. And it's not even something I should probably be talking about. But it did. But that did happen. And it made me question, well, is anything this guy told me true? Okay. Now, because of what the officials told us. Okay. So,
Well,
but if I've learned anything, Mark, I know the officials don't always tell us the full truth.
yeah, that's what I was fixing to say. You know, I've had my dealings with officials too, and
Hmm.
they didn't get to be officials by being official.
That's right.
So
Man, tell me about it. That's true.
and then on top of that, you know, in some instances, I'm pretty sure that they're required to keep certain things under wraps and hush hush. Why that is, I don't know, but I had a case that I was working on. back in 2007, uh, where a coroner official 100% negated um, information that I was receiving from other people about an incident, to the point that it just was outlandish. So whether or not he was required to or felt obligated in some way to skew that information, I don't know, but it was definitely not the same information that I was receiving.
Interesting. Coroners are elected officials. I'm just saying. I'm just kidding. I used to work in politics. Listen, I know how this works. I know how politics work, especially down here in the South. Okay, with the good old boy networks and stuff. So
Hmm.
it's just something to keep in mind when you're doing this research. Okay, it's just something to keep in mind, and
Oh yeah,
go with your gut. Right, go with your gut. Go do the investigations, boots on the ground. If you get a report, somebody wants you to come out and investigate. Go. If you're on a team, go investigate it. And get the information from every possible source, even the coroner's office. But now, I mean, talking to you, we took that as being, I part of most of what we investigated could have been very much real. It really happened. We didn't find any sign of Bigfoot out there. Okay, we really didn't. We didn't find a whole lot of sign. However, people's encounters are their encounters, and who are we to say? I mean, it even went from like shape shifting Bigfoots, like Bigfoot. Some people seeing a Bigfoot, a 7 to 9 foot tall Bigfoot, and the people behind them saw a 7 inch tall squirrel. You know, just some of this
it's
stuff
weird
is
how that works.
unexplainable. It
It's
is
weird how that works. It is.
absolutely, yeah. So
I've
wow,
experienced the same thing. You have a group of people, and like 4 or 5 out of the group see a Bigfoot, and the rest of the group sees something totally different.
exactly.
I mean, how does that work? it's, it's weird for sure.
It is weird. It's almost like they're able to project different things into our minds or what we're seeing, or I don't know. It's the same thing with ETs and all these other cryptids. Bigfoot's probably Dogman too, but definitely the Bigfoot phenomenon. Um, and you've been out doing research on Bigfoot, like you said, you were out there looking for Bigfoot footprints when you came upon a Dogman. So um, we don't go out looking for dogmen. I'm part of a Bigfoot
No.
field research. I'm part of 3 different teams, but we've never gone out there just looking for dogmen. But dogmen are in the vicinity, and we get reports to where the dogmen are in our areas that we go and do research at. I personally have never happened upon a dogman, but I've never called one in. I've never tried, but if it's there, I wouldn't mind seeing it. But I am careful what I wish for, Mark. I'm careful what I wish
Oh
for.
yeah. There's nothing wrong with a
Yeah.
little bit of caution,
Yes.
but yeah, it's definitely not something I was looking for. Um, but it's kind of like that old saying. When you peer into the mysterious will peer back into you. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Um, it definitely leaves a lot for a person to think about.
It does. It does. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your experiences with me today
Oh,
and
you're
with my
welcome.
audience. What a perfect
You're
Halloween
welcome.
night. I tell you what, this has been
Definitely.
amazing. Yeah. What do you
Uh,
have planned for your future? And do you first of all, do you have any advice too for anyone who encounters a dogman or even wants to encounter something like that?
well, as I mentioned earlier, just the best advice I can give is be careful what you wish for, because of the simple fact that, one, it's never going to happen the way that you think it's going to. Um, the outcome is probably not going to be what you're anticipating. Um, and you know, whatever you do, do not try to exchange things with these entities as far as gifting that kind of thing, because, and this is just my opinion, there are people out there that have done this and done it for years and had interactions with them, but the question always enters my mind: what happens when that that line of exchange stops? Um,
Right.
you know, and I'm sure everybody's heard the stories where exchange stops have ended in a bad way. And I'm not saying that everyone would end that way, but um, if you don't indulge, then there's nothing to worry about, right?
Right. Yeah, you don't wanna make anything mad, okay? Especially if you're in a national or state park, you don't really wanna go put food out and stuff, especially near the campground areas, because once you leave that food out there and you leave, there's gonna be other families that come with their kids out there to play that next week or sometime, and they're gonna be those critters out there are gonna be expecting some food most likely,
Oh
and if
yeah.
they don't get it, there could be problems. Yeah.
One of the more interesting events that happened on one of my research trips with some friends. We had we had one try to snag a steak off of a grill one night,
Oh,
and when he came through, he the grill was open, and he saw that there was nothing on the grill and just kind of went on his way. Well, what happened if he was like at the brink of starvation? I mean, he could have snagged one of us.
yeah.
So,
Could have. Steak tastes better though, probably, I would
oh
assume.
yeah,
That's why I eat a lot of garlic, try to keep things away. Well, vampires at least. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so tell me about what you got going on. Are you gonna be, doing some more research out in the LBL and, uh, tell me about you've got a YouTube channel too. Are you gonna be posting on your YouTube channel some of your adventures?
So as far as what the future holds, I am going to be doing some more new content for my YouTube channel, which is Cryptidville on YouTube. Also, that same content and other content of friends and family, if you will, is also reflected on my website, which is cryptidville.com. And as far as research goes, I am going to be doing some new things in some new areas, and some of those areas include the LBL and other areas in the vicinity. Um, one thing that I've uh, wanted to do was expand into different areas that I've not researched in before, like say the Mammoth Cave area. I know a lot of people um, in that area, and um, I think it would be kind of interesting to research some of those cave areas. I'm not enthused about you know spending a long time in a cave, but
Caves are creepy. Yeah.
I always tell
Ask
people,
me how I know.
I always tell people, haven't you seen that movie, The Descent or Descent or whatever it's
Yeah.
called, where you got
That's what it feels like.
the three or four young ladies that go down into the cave? Yeah, n- not my style.
It's
Um,
creepy.
but yeah, that's that's kind of what I'm looking at in the near future. Um, Generally, I don't broadcast what I'm doing when I'm doing it, um,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, until after it happens. So that's
Smart.
always been
Very
that's always
smart.
been that's always been my mode of operating. And along with that, there are some locations where I've had experiences before that I want to revisit and film the locations and relate those events as they happened. Stuff that nobody's ever heard of, nobody knows. Um, and for example, one of the events is going to be released in. Uh, I believe Barton Nunley said he's going to be writing another Mysterious Kentucky book, and one of those events is going to be featured in his new book. So you'll have to wait until it comes out to hear that or read that story. Very interesting um, event that happened to myself and another guy. Well, I say another guy, but he was totally unaware of what was going on. But definitely a creepy, interesting story. So, but
We
I
like
would like to,
creepy.
yeah, I would like to go back and film that area if possible, if I could get on that particular military installation and do that.
Oh, what's up with the military installations and cryptids? There's a connection, I think. I've looked into it before. What do you think about that?
I would have to say that there is a connection. Um, you have to check out that story and
Oh,
see what that
uh-oh. Leave us in
connection
suspense.
poss-
I get it.
what the connection possibly could be. They
Nice. Well,
if
that's something
nothing
to look
else,
forward to.
yeah, if nothing else, they definitely know that these things are around at the minimum.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. Absolutely. Well, oh my goodness. Well, hey, Mark, if you're ever down in Georgia, or if you want to make a trip down here to do some Bigfooting and even dogmanning, I guess you could call it, come to Georgia. I'll take you out with my team anytime. I'd love to host you down here sometime and let you experience
Sounds
some
good.
Georgia Bigfoots.
Well,
Yeah,
I
for
appreciate it,
sure. For sure.
and thank you for
Yeah.
the invite. Real quick though, I would like to if you would allow me give a short plug for some of the friends that I have in the community. As everyone
Yes,
probably knows,
absolutely.
I am uh, proud to be involved with the Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is a loose knit group that was formed by Barton Nunley. I was kind of grandfathered in. I was in the Brotherhood before the Brotherhood existed, kind of thing. And just wanted to mention Inhumanoids with Barton Nunley. Um, also, Blondes and Booze. Uh, they have a podcast. Also, just want to mention the Paranormal Roundtable with Josh Turner. Uh, check out their content. They've got some great information, great shows. Just check it out. Also, Hellbent Holler. Um, I would say I'm trying to remember everybody. You can check out. I know Daryl Denton has got a group on Facebook. Uh, it slips my mind because I don't have that computer pulled up at the moment. What the name of the group is? Encourage everybody to check that out, and just basically anybody that's involved uh, with the Brotherhood of the Wolf um, is definitely worth checking out. Um, and once again, Jessica, just want to thank you for allowing me to come on your show and sharing some of the stories and information that I've encountered in my time.
Well, thank you for being here. This has been amazing. Like I said, it's been an amazing Halloween. And yeah, Cryptidville. I mean, we all know you in my chat and on the shows is Cryptidville. Okay, so it's nice to put a face with the name. I know that all of my followers, everybody that watches the shows, is glad to have you here as well as me, big time. And I hope
Appreciate
you'll
it.
come back and hang out with me some more.
Most
Okay, and
definitely.
yeah, and absolutely. Well, I wanted to thank you for being here. also want to thank Vic Cundiff, okay, with Dogman Encounters. He was nice enough and kind enough to put me and include me, and you too, okay, Mark, with the 5 nights of Dogman Encounters leading up to Halloween.
Awesome.
This is the final night, y'all. And so this is this is a finale. Actually, we have David Devine broadcasted is doing a show right now as well. He's going to be the last of the shows for the 5 nights of Dogman Encounters tonight. So you guys go over there and hang out with him next after we close the show down tonight. So yeah, all right. Well, this has been amazing. I hope you guys will come back and hang out with me tomorrow. I have a glitch in the matrix tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern here at the Cryptid Huntress on YouTube. All right, Mark. Well, this has been awesome. And you guys go please subscribe to Cryptiville over on YouTube and check out his website. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Mark. Well, listen, have a wonderful Halloween night.
too.
You stay safe out there. And
Watch out for the
I will
spookies.
see you guys back here. Just watch out for y'all. Lock your doors. Okay. Stay safe. All right. See you, Mark. Bye, y'all.